The night was quiet, too quiet for a land known for gunfire and broken men. A cold wind swept across the empty desert, carrying only dust and silence. But somewhere out there, far from any town lights, a young rider pushed his tired horse forward. His eyes were sharp. His hands were steady. His name was Jesse Evans. And long before the world knew him as an outlaw, the world had already tried to break him. No one knew exactly where his story began. Some said he was born in Texas around 1853. Some believed he came from Alabama. Others whispered that his real name wasn't Evans at all. But everyone agreed on one thing. Trouble followed him like a shadow. Even when he was just a boy, Jesse grew up in a place where people did not talk about dreams. They talked about food, land, and how to stay alive until morning. His family lived a hard life, the kind that turned boys into men far too early. He learned to ride before he could read. He learned to shoot before he learned to write his own name. And he learned that the world was not fair. Not to him. Not to anyone. Most boys his age played in fields. Jesse watched grown men fight over water, cattle, and pride. He saw neighbors lose everything in a single night. He heard angry voices, breaking glass, and gunshots echoing through the darkness. These sounds became his lullaby. Violence was normal. Fear was normal. Survival was the only rule that mattered. By the time he reached his early teens, Jesse had already drifted away from home. Maybe he left on his own. Maybe he was forced out. No one really knew. But the boy who walked away was not innocent anymore. He carried with him a growing hunger, a desire to escape poverty, to escape weakness, and to never be powerless again. At first, he lived by helping ranchers. He cleaned stables, fed horses, and did whatever small jobs he could find. But ranch work did not feed ambition. It only fed the men who owned the land. Jesse saw that. He watched his bosses grow richer while he stayed hungry and tired. And slowly, a dangerous thought began to grow in his mind. If the world will not give me what I need, I will take it. That thought changed everything. One evening, Jesse met a group of young riders in a dusty New Mexico town. They were loud, confident, and walked with the swagger of men who feared nothing. Their clothes were worn, but their guns were polished. Their horses were fast. They carried money, real money, and Jesse noticed it. They were thieves ruthless who stole cattle, horses, and anything worth selling. But to Jesse, they were something more. They were free. They lived on their own terms. No one commanded them. No one controlled them. They made their own destiny. Jesse watched one of the riders toss a silver coin across a table. It landed in front of him with a bright metallic ring. The rider smiled and said, "Boy, you look like someone who's tired of being poor." That single moment pulled Jesse into a new world. Before the sun rose the next morning, Jesse Evans was riding with the gang. At first, he was just the new kid, the one who followed orders, kept his mouth shut, and learned by watching. But he learned fast. He watched how they sneaked into ranches at night. He watched how they redirected herds without being seen. He watched how they handled danger with calm confidence. He studied everything. And when it was time for him to act, Jesse didn't hesitate. He rode hard, pushed his limits, and proved he could handle himself. When trouble came, Jesse stayed calm. When bullets flew, he didn't freeze. Something inside him awakened something strong, wild and fearless. Within months, Jesse Evans wasn't the new kid anymore. He was becoming one of the best riders in the group. But the outlaw world was a lesson in loyalty and betrayal, in fear and power. Jesse understood that to survive this new life, he needed more than skill. He needed control. He needed a crew of his own. As he got older, Jesse began forming his own circle of riders. They were young, fast, dangerous, and loyal to him. They admired him because he was brave. They followed him because he led without fear. And slowly, the name Jesse Evans started to echo through the territory. During this time, Jesse also realized something important. People respected violence. People respected strength. People respected a man who didn't back down. And Jesse made sure no one forgot that. He rode into towns with confidence. He handled conflicts with a steady hand. He didn't look for trouble, but he didn't run from it either. If someone challenged him, he stood tall. If someone betrayed him, he didn't forgive. The West was cruel, and Jesse became what the West demanded. By the early 1870s, he was no longer just a drifting cowboy searching for survival. He had become a skilled outlaw with growing influence. His riders moved like shadows. They struck quickly and disappeared before anyone could react. Locals feared them, ranchers hated them, and lawmen wanted them behind bars. But none of that stopped Jesse. In fact, it pushed him to climb higher. He was ambitious. He wanted power. He wanted wealth, and he wanted his name to be known, and soon. Someone noticed his rising influence, someone powerful, someone dangerous. Someone who would pull Jesse into a conflict far bigger than anything he had ever faced. A conflict that would shape legends. A conflict that would turn the West into a battlefield. A conflict where Jesse Evans would stand on one side and a young gunfighter named Billy the Kid would stand on the other. The path to that war had already begun. Jesse Evans was no longer the boy the world forgot. He was the outlaw the world would learn to fear. The sun burned hot over Lincoln County, and the tension in the air felt heavy enough to snap. This land was supposed to be a fresh start for ranchers and shopkeepers. Instead, it had become a place where powerful men played dangerous games. And Jesse Evans was about to step into the center of it all. As Jesse's reputation grew, whispers about him reached the ears of the most influential men in the territory: Lawrence, Murphy, and James Dolan. These were not ordinary businessmen. They controlled land, money, and the local law. Anyone who challenged their power soon found themselves ruined or dead. Murphy and Dolan needed gunmen fast, experienced, and willing to do the dirty work. Jesse Evans fit that job perfectly. One evening, Jesse was called into a dimly lit storeroom behind a saloon. Murphy, with tired eyes and a cold smile, stared at him across the table. "You're smart, Jesse," Murphy said. "Smart men take opportunities. We're offering you one." The opportunity was simple: protect Murphy Dolan interests, keep their enemies weak, and handle any problems that threatened their business. Jesse accepted without hesitation. He knew siding with power meant protection and money. More importantly, it meant influence. It meant he would no longer be just an outlaw. He would be a force in the county. He had no idea the job would drag him into one of the bloodiest conflicts the West would ever see. Across Lincoln County, a new partnership had appeared. John Tunstall and Alexander McSween, fair, honest, and willing to offer competition. Their arrival made Murphy Dolan furious. It threatened everything they controlled. Tensions grew. Threats were exchanged. Everyone sensed a storm was coming. Jesse Evans and his riders were paid to make sure that storm favored Murphy-Dolan. At first, Jesse's jobs were small: intimidate a rancher, steal cattle, send a warning. But every job added fuel to the flames. Every threat pushed the county closer to war. Meanwhile, far away on Tunstall's ranch, a young cowboy was sharpening his shooting skills and building loyalty with other riders. His name was Billy the Kid. Jesse and Billy didn't know it yet, but their fates were moving toward each other like two trains on the same track by early 1878. Murphy Dolan wanted a message sent, one that could not be ignored. They wanted Tunstall weakened before his business became too strong. They wanted fear planted in every rancher who supported him, so they gave Jesse Evans a task that would change history. On February 18th, 1878, Jesse and several gunmen were ordered to intercept Tunstall. It wasn't supposed to be a fight. It was supposed to be a warning. But fate does not follow orders. Jesse and his riders approached from behind. Tunstall stopped, raised his hands, and tried to speak. But fear, anger, and confusion filled the moment. A shot cracked through the quiet morning. Tunstall fell from his horse. Some accounts say Jesse fired the fatal bullet. Others claim someone else did. But in the eyes of the world, Jesse Evans was part of the killing. News spread fast. Tunstall's young riders felt betrayed and enraged, especially the slim, sharp-eyed cowboy named Billy the Kid. Tunstall had treated Billy like family. Now he was gone. Billy swore revenge. And in Lincoln County, war began. The battle lines were clear. Jesse Evans rode with Murphy Dolan, backed by wealth, lawmen, and hired killers. Billy the Kid rode with the regulators, fueled by loyalty, grief, and a burning desire for justice. Jesse didn't fear Billy. In fact, part of him admired the young gunfighter's courage. But admiration did not matter in a war. What mattered was survival. Gunfights erupted in the streets. Ambushes took place on lonely roads. Ranches turned into battlegrounds. The county was no longer a quiet frontier. It was a place where every sunrise could be someone's last dot. Jesse Evans fought fiercely. He led charges. He tracked down regulators. He rode through danger without hesitation. His name spread across New Mexico, whispered by those who feared him and those who respected him. But a strange thing began to happen. While Jesse fought for money and power, Billy fought for something deeper. Billy was turning into a legend. People were fascinated by him, drawn to his charm and incredible skill with a gun. Asterisk. Jesse noticed it. He didn't like it. For the first time, he realized he wasn't the only young outlaw rising in the West. There was someone else beside him in the spotlight. Someone faster, someone more unpredictable, someone who didn't fear death. The war forced Jesse and Billy into multiple confrontations, sometimes close, sometimes from a distance. Bullets crossed paths between the two young fighters more than once. Each time, the rivalry grew stronger. One night, Jesse's gang launched a surprise attack on a group of regulators. The gunfire was brutal, the shouting nonstop. Billy the Kid returned fire, his movements quick and precise. Jesse watched him fight and realized that Billy was not just skilled, he was dangerous. That night ended in blood and smoke, and neither side claimed victory. But something changed inside Jesse Evans. For the first time in his life, he had found someone who matched him, someone he couldn't easily intimidate, someone who would not run from him. As months went by, the Lincoln County war dragged on. Friends became enemies. Towns became war zones. Many men died. Some switched sides. Others simply disappeared. Jesse Evans stayed loyal to Murphy Dolan. He believed loyalty meant strength. He believed power would protect him. But the war was changing him, hardening him even more, isolating him further, pushing him toward a destiny he could not yet see. Billy the Kid was rising. Jesse Evans was fighting harder than ever. And neither man knew that the war was only the beginning of a much darker future. The Lincoln County War burned across New Mexico like a raging fire, and Jesse Evans was standing in the heart of it. Every day felt like a coin toss between life and death. Every night, gunshots echoed across the hills. Outlaws, ranchers, and hired killers moved across the land like storm clouds. Each man looking for an enemy, each man ready to shoot. Jesse Evans rode through this chaos with the same confidence he had carried since he was a teenager. He had survived too much to fear anything now. But deep inside, something else was growing: pressure, responsibility, and the heavy weight of being one of the most wanted men in the territory. As leader of his gang, Jesse could not afford mistakes. His riders looked to him for decisions, for courage, for the kind of cool, steady voice that kept men alive. But even the strongest men feel the strain of war. Jesse just never allowed anyone to see it. Lincoln County was no longer a peaceful settlement, it was a battlefield. On one side stood Murphy Dolan, powerful, ruthless, and determined to crush their enemies. On the other side stood Tunstall's regulators, fueled by justice, revenge, and the determination of young men who refused to back down. Jesse Evans rode at the front of Murphy Dolan's hired guns. He knew the terrain, he knew the people, and he knew how to make fear work in his favor. But the war was changing quickly. The regulators, led by men like Billy the Kid, were becoming more organized, more skilled, and more dangerous. Jesse could feel it. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was becoming a challenge. The war reached every corner of the county. Streets that once held mothers, children, and shopkeepers now shook with gunfire. Ranch houses turned into makeshift forts. Courthouses became weapons. Every decision, every rumor, every small move could start another gunfight. Jesse Evans took part in many of these street battles. He led ambushes. He defended Murphy Dolan property. He tracked regulators who disappeared into the desert. He moved with the speed and instinct of a man who understood war better than most soldiers. Yet every time he rode into a fight, he knew there was a chance Billy the Kid would be on the other end of a gun. And that possibility kept Jesse sharp. The two young outlaws were unpredictable forces, one driven by loyalty and justice, the other by survival and ambition. They didn't meet face to face often, but their bullets met in the air more times than anyone could count. One afternoon, Jesse and a group of riders were tracking regulators across a canyon. The sun was brutal. Dust filled their lungs. The men were hungry and tired. Jesse was certain they were close. Then, shots exploded from above. Billy and the regulators had taken the high ground. Jesse's horse reared back as bullets rained down. His men scrambled for cover, shouting orders and firing blindly through the smoke and dust. Jesse saw a slim figure with a rifle move like a shadow, fast, calm, unshaken. It was Billy. Jesse stared for a moment, impressed despite the danger. Billy didn't fight like most men. His movements were sharp, clean, almost graceful. He wasn't just shooting, he was thinking 10 steps ahead. Jesse realized something important. Billy wasn't becoming a legend. Billy already was one. That moment bothered Jesse more than he would admit. He wanted to be the figure people feared. He wanted to be the one whose name echoed across the West. He didn't care about glory, but he cared about power, and power came from reputation. Now, he had to share the spotlight. As the war dragged on, something changed in Lincoln County. People started whispering another name more often than Jesse's. That name was Billy the Kid. Families talked about his accuracy with a gun. Ranchers spoke about his quickness. Young boys practiced drawing imaginary pistols, pretending to be Billy. Even men who despised him admitted they had never seen someone fight like him. Jesse noticed the shift. He heard the talk. He watched as the regulators gained popularity. And for the first time, Jesse Evans felt the sting of competition, not in a gunfight, but in reputation. Jesse was feared. Billy was admired. That difference cut deeper than any bullet. The regulators, determined to avenge Tunstall's death, began hunting down members of Murphy Dolan's crew. They grew more organized. Their attacks became strategic. They were no longer a small group of cowboys. They were a force. And Jesse Evans was one of their main targets. Several times, the regulators attempted to corner Jesse. Several times, he escaped by seconds. His survival wasn't luck, it was instinct. Jesse had an ability to sense danger before it arrived. He trusted his gut more than he trusted any man. Still, the pressure was rising. His gang was starting to feel the weight of being hunted. Some complained. Others wanted to leave. Jesse did his best to hold them together, but war tests loyalty in ways friendship cannot. And yet, Jesse refused to run. Running wasn't who he was. Running wasn't how he survived all these years. If Lincoln County wanted a fight, Jesse Evans would give it one. Unlike Billy, Jesse did not crave fame. He preferred to operate from the shadows quietly, efficiently, and without unnecessary noise. But war has no shadows. War forces men into the open. Whether they want it or not, Jesse found himself facing new kinds of problems: ambushes, planned raids, and rising numbers of regulators. His gang was shrinking, supplies were low, and Murphy Dolan expected more from him every day. He was caught between pressure from his employers and danger from his enemies. But Jesse refused to bend. He refused to show cracks. He refused to let anyone see the toll the war was taking on him. By the end of the spring, everyone knew the Lincoln County War could not last much longer. Too many men had died. Too many homes were destroyed. Too many families lived in fear. But before the war could end, something big had to happen, something that would break one side's spirit. And Jesse Evans would soon find himself at the center of that breaking point. He didn't know it yet. But the next few months would change everything's gang, his power, his future. The war was about to push him into the most dangerous chapter of his life, and the legend of Jesse Evans was only just beginning. The war was dragging on, and the people of Lincoln County were tired. They wanted peace, but peace never comes easily. When pride, power, and revenge take control of men's hearts, Jesse Evans could feel the shift. Something heavy hung in the air, like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next gunshot that would tip the balance forever. For weeks, Jesse and his riders moved like shadows. They hid in old barns, dry creek beds, and abandoned cabins. They rode at night, slept in daylight, and trusted no one. They knew the regulators were out there, searching for them, hungry for payback. Jesse did not fear death. Jesse did not fear death, but he feared something else: losing control. Losing the authority he had built, the power he had earned, the gang that followed him with unshakable loyalty. And now, for the first time, that loyalty was being tested. The constant pressure of the Lincoln County War was wearing his men down. Some complained that Murphy Dolan wasn't paying enough. Others whispered that the regulators were too strong. One rider even suggested leaving New Mexico altogether. Jesse shut that idea down fast. "We don't run," he told them. His voice was calm, but there was a storm beneath it. "We finish what we started." His men obeyed, but Jesse could feel their uncertainty. Loyalty was easy when things were going well. It was much harder when every sunrise felt like a countdown to another fight. Still, Jesse held them together with the same unshakable confidence he had always shown. He reminded them that money, influence, and survival came from power, power came from standing their ground. But he knew the truth, Leader can only hold broken pieces for so long before something shatters. On the other side of the county, Billy the Kid and the regulators were becoming more aggressive. Rumors spread that Billy had shot down men twice his age and outsmarted soldiers who tried to trap him. Some said he could hit a coin tossed into the air. Others swore he could ride through a storm of bullets untouched. Jesse heard all the stories. He didn't believe most of them, but the ones he did believe were enough. Billy was young, but he was becoming fearless. And fearless men were the most dangerous kind. Jesse couldn't ignore it anymore. Billy was rising. Billy was inspiring. Billy was becoming the face of the regulators. And Jesse, he remained in the shadows, powerful, yes, feared, yes, but overshadowed by a young gunfighter who didn't even want fame. That bothered Jesse deeply, more than he would ever admit. One hot afternoon, Jesse and his men were hiding near the Rio Bonito, waiting for orders from Murphy Dolan. The heat pressed down like a heavy hand. Sweat dripped from every brow. Horses snorted and stamped, sensing trouble. Jesse was sharpening his knife when one of his riders galloped toward him, breathing hard. "They're coming," he said. "Who?" Jesse asked. "The regulators." Jesse stood, wiping the blade clean. "How many?" "Enough." A tense silence fell over the camp. Jesse's men grabbed rifles, checked their revolvers, and found whatever cover they could. Moments later, the regulators appeared at the tree-line, silent, focused, deadly. Billy the Kid was among them. No one spoke, no one moved. It felt like time froze, trapping both sides in a deadly calm. Then the first shot rang out. Gunfire exploded across the camp. Bullets tore through tree bark and kicked up dirt. Horses shrieked and bucked. Jesse shouted orders, firing back with precision and fury. He fought like a man who refused to lose. His coat snapped behind him like a flag. His face stayed calm even as gun smoke clouded the air. At one point, Jesse saw Billy clearly standing behind a fallen log, firing smoothly, his eyes cold but focused. For a brief moment, the two young outlaws locked eyes. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. That single moment said everything. We are meant to clash. We are meant to meet again. This war is not done with either of us. The shootout lasted only minutes, but it felt like an hour. When the regulators finally withdrew, Jesse's camp was half destroyed. Two of his riders lay wounded. Supplies were ruined. The horses were panicked. Jesse stood in the silence afterward, breathing hard, staring at the place where Billy had been. He wasn't angry. He wasn't afraid. He was unsettled. Billy the Kid was not an enemy to underestimate anymore. After the standoff, word spread like wildfire. Jesse Evans and Billy the Kid had finally faced each other. People talked about it in saloons, around campfires, and in dusty streets. Some said Jesse held his ground like a true outlaw leader. Others said Billy proved he was the fastest in the territory, but everyone agreed on one thing. The war was reaching a breaking point. Townspeople begged for peace. Ranchers tightened security. Even Murphy Dolan started feeling the pressure. They wanted the regulators gone, but they also wanted Jesse to stop drawing attention with every gunfight. Jesse hated that. He wasn't trying to draw attention, he was trying to survive. He was trying to win. And he was trying to protect the men who still trusted him. But the walls were closing in. Inside Murphy Dolan's inner circle, whispers began to spread. Some questioned whether Jesse's gang was still useful. Some thought he was a liability. Others wondered if he might switch sides if things got too dangerous. Jesse heard these rumors, and they angered him more than anything the regulators had ever done. He had risked his life for these powerful men. He had done their dirty work. Now, they dared to doubt him. For the first time, Jesse realized he wasn't just fighting the regulators. He might soon be fighting the very people who hired him. The world of power he had climbed into was beginning to close its doors. As the days passed, Jesse could feel something dark building in the distance. The war was entering its most violent stage. Men were dying every week. Families were fleeing their homes. The law was collapsing. Lincoln County was turning into a battlefield no one could control. And Jesse Evans, once a confident outlaw leader, now stood trapped between two enemies. The regulators behind him, Murphy Dolan ahead of him. He sensed the storm approaching. He knew the next battle would change his life forever, and he had no idea that his greatest test was still waiting for him closer than he imagined. The sun was sinking behind the mountains. When Jesse Evans realized something had changed inside him, the Lincoln County War was no longer just a job. It wasn't about money or loyalty to Murphy Dolan. It wasn't even about fighting the regulators anymore. It had become personal, too personal. For months, Jesse had fought hard, survived ambushes, and escaped death more times than he could count. But after facing Billy the Kid at the river and seeing the speed and fire in Billy's eyes, Jesse felt a shift, one that twisted deep inside his chest. Billy wasn't just another enemy. Billy was something else. A rival, a reminder that Jesse was not the only dangerous young outlaw in the West, and that truth followed him everywhere he rode. Lincoln County was falling apart. Buildings burned. Families fled. Nights echoed with gunshots. Rumors grew louder with every passing day. Murphy and Dolan demanded control. The regulators demanded justice. And caught in the middle of all of it stood Jesse Evans. He felt the pressure tightening like a rope around his neck. Murphy Dolan wanted results. They wanted the regulators crushed. They wanted Tunstall's supporters silenced. But Jesse's gang was running low on supplies, low on ammunition, and low on morale. Some of his men were scared. Others were angry. A few were ready to walk away. Jesse tried to keep them steady, but even he knew the war was beginning to eat them alive. Still, he refused to back down. "We hold our ground," Jesse told them one night as they sat around a dying fire. "I didn't come this far to run now." His voice was steady, but inside, he was fighting a storm of his own. The next major battle erupted in the town of Lincoln itself. The regulators stormed into town, chasing down anyone tied to Murphy Dolan. Jesse was nearby when the news reached him. Without hesitation, he gathered his men and charged into Lincoln to support his employers. The streets were chaos, smoke rising, windows smashing, gunfire echoing between buildings. People hid wherever they could. The air smelled of fear. Jesse moved quickly, firing from alleyways, ducking behind wagons, watching for regulators on rooftops. He fought like he always did, calm, focused, calculating. But the regulators were everywhere. Their leader wasn't Billy this time, it was Dick Brewer, a man ready to do whatever it took to win justice for Tunstall. The regulators had taken positions around the McSween home, trapping one of Murphy Doolin's biggest enemies inside. Jesse arrived in the middle of the siege. The McSween house burned like a torch. Flames licked the sky. Regulators moved in and out of cover, firing at anyone who tried to get near. Jesse and his riders pushed forward, trying to break the siege. Bullets whistled past. Men screamed. Horses bucked in terror. It was one of the closest things Lincoln County had seen to a true war zone. During the battle, Jesse saw something that stayed with him forever. He saw regulators' boys no older than he had been when he joined his first gang running into fire to protect their leader. They faced gunshots without hesitation. They fought with purpose, passion, and belief. Jesse froze for a moment. His own men were fighting for money. Billy's men were fighting for justice. That difference mattered. For the first time, Jesse wondered if he had chosen the wrong side. But he pushed the thought away. There was no turning back. Not now, not in the middle of a burning town. As the fire grew, the regulators retreated. McSween and several supporters tried to escape the burning house. Jesse spotted movement through the flames and fired. Chaos exploded as men ran for their lives. In the confusion, McSween was struck down. The death of Alexander McSween sent shockwaves through the county. It marked a major turning point in the war. Even though Jesse had not acted alone, many people blamed him for the violence that followed. That moment chained Jesse to the darkest parts of the conflict. Forever, the siege of Lincoln ended with Murphy Doolin's side alive and standing. Jesse and his gunmen held control of the town, but the victory fell hollow. Too many men had died. Too many homes had been destroyed. Too many lines had been crossed. And yet, the regulators still lived. Billy lived. And that meant the war wasn't finished. Jesse knew it. He felt it. He felt Billy out there, riding through the night, planning the next move, building his legend with every step. In the ruins of Lincoln, as smoke curled into the sky, Jesse Evans realized something painful. The regulators weren't going away. Billy the Kid wasn't fading. And Jesse's own power was slowly slipping from his hands. After the battle, Jesse went to meet with Murphy and Dolan. He expected gratitude. He expected praise. Instead, he saw worry in their eyes. "We need more control," Murphy said. "The situation is unstable, too unstable." Jesse frowned. "We did what you asked." "Yes," Dolan interrupted, "but the regulators are stronger than we expected, and the governor is watching everything now." Jesse felt something inside him. Twist. The men who once praised him were now cautious, cold, calculating. They needed Jesse, but they were also ready to blame him if things went wrong. Jesse left the meeting with a sense of dread crawling up his spine. He was starting to understand how powerful men worked. Loyalty only mattered when it was useful. As the weeks passed, the war slowed but didn't stop. Small fights broke out across the county, ambushes, raids, revenge killings. Each side claimed they were right. Each side believed they were the victims. There were no heroes here, only survivors, and Jesse Evans had become one of the most recognizable faces of the violence. The newspapers called him a killer. The townspeople whispered his name like a warning. Even some of his own men were growing unsure. But Jesse pushed forward. He had come too far to turn back. He had no choice but to see the war through to the end. And deep down, he knew his biggest challenge was approaching one more confrontation that would shape the rest of his life. A confrontation that would bring him face to face with the deadliest young gunfighter in the West, Billy the Kid. The war wasn't over. The story wasn't finished. And Jesse's darkest days were coming. The war had slowed, but it hadn't died. Lincoln County was a place holding its breath, waiting for the next burst of violence. And while the fires of battle cooled, Jesse Evans walked through the ashes of what he helped create. His gang was shrinking. His influence was slipping. And the name Billy the Kid echoed louder with every passing day. Jesse still rode with confidence. But it wasn't the same as before. There was a weight behind his eyes. Now a tension built from too many gunfights, too many betrayals, too many close calls. He had survived a war, but survival carried a cost he didn't expect. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on him. Though the major battles were over, Lincoln County was far from peaceful. Rival groups still roamed the land. Revenge lingered in the air like smoke. Men who had fought on opposite sides now crossed paths in saloons, in fields, and on lonely roads, each encounter threatening to explode into another killing. The regulators were weaker, their numbers smaller, but Billy the Kid remained a problem. Murphy Dolan wanted gone, and Jesse knew what that meant. He knew the kind of work they expected him to do. But Jesse also sensed that Murphy Dolan's time was running out. Their power was stretching thin. Their allies were fleeing. And the government was tired of the bloodshed. Jesse, once their prize gunman, was now something else. A liability. A reminder of the violence they could no longer hide. One cold evening, Jesse met with Dolan in a quiet storeroom behind a half-empty saloon. The fire crackled, throwing shadows across the walls. "Jesse," Dolan began, "things are changing. We need to think carefully." Jesse narrowed his eyes. "Careful? We've been fighting your war for months. This isn't just about us anymore," Dolan said. "The governor is watching. The press is watching. Everyone wants someone to blame." Jesse felt his stomach tighten. "Someone," he repeated. Dolan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Jesse understood. They were preparing to distance themselves from him. He was becoming too dangerous to protect and too famous to ignore. Jesse walked out of that room knowing he had just crossed an invisible line. He was no longer a hired gun. He was a target waiting for the right moment. Rumors spread that the regulators were planning another attack, maybe even a full retaliation for McSween's death. Billy the Kid still carried the fire of vengeance in his heart, and he wasn't done yet. Jesse grew restless. Every sound in the night felt like a warning. Every shadow felt like a rider approaching. Every whisper felt like someone speaking his name. One evening, as Jesse and two of his men camped near a creek, gunshots ripped through the darkness. Regulators had found them. Jesse dove behind a rock as bullets struck the ground inches from his boots. His men returned fire, shouting into the night. Jesse stayed calm. He aimed slowly. He fired with precision. The shootout lasted only a few minutes, but it left the air heavy with smoke and the ground stained with blood. One of Jesse's men was hit. Another fled into the darkness. Jesse himself barely escaped, disappearing on a horseback before the regulators could surround him. The message was clear. The regulators weren't finished. Billy wasn't finished. And Jesse's time in Lincoln County was running out. As Jesse rode through the night, a strange thought crept into his mind. For the first time, he wondered what might have happened if he had chosen differently. If he had sided with Tunstall instead of Murphy Dolan. If he had worked with Billy instead of against him. But the West was not a place for regrets. Regrets made men weak. Weak men died. Jesse pushed the thought away, but it clung to him like a ghost. A few days later, Jesse and his remaining riders stopped at a small ranch to rest. The ranch owner, an older man with tired eyes, warned him quietly, "People are talking Jesse. They say Murphy and Dolan might turn you in. They say you know too much." Jesse stiffened. He had always known this day might come, but hearing it from a stranger made it real. If Murphy Dolan betrayed him, the regulators would come next. And if the regulators didn't get him, the law surely would. He was surrounded by enemies, some seen, some hidden, some pretending to be allies. For the first time in his life, Jesse Evans didn't feel untouchable. He felt hunted. That night, Jesse sat alone, staring into the fire. His riders slept nearby, unaware of the storm inside him. He turned the same thought over and over. If I stay, I die. If I run, I lose everything. But what was everything now? A shrinking gang, dwindling power, a county falling apart, a war that would never truly end. Jesse realized something painful, something he had spent years refusing to admit. Power is temporary. Fear eventually fades. And even the most feared outlaw can become just another name in someone else's story. Slowly, Jesse stood up. He walked to his horse. He placed a hand on its mane. He had made his choice. Before dawn, Jesse rode away from camp without waking his men. He didn't look back. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't explain himself. He knew the war was over for him. He knew staying meant death. And deep in his heart, he knew a new fate waited beyond the borders of Lincoln County. What he didn't know was this: leaving the war behind wouldn't save him. Escaping Lincoln County would only lead him toward a darker future, one filled with new dangers, new enemies, and a final destiny he could never outrun. The road ahead would change Jesse Evans forever, and whether he wanted it or not, his legend was not finished yet. Jesse Evans rode through the cold darkness, leaving Lincoln County behind him. He didn't turn his head once. He didn't slow down. He didn't let himself think about the men he left sleeping by the fire. He only let his horse carry him forward into the unknown. The stars above him were sharp, scattered across a black sky. The land was silent, too silent. In that silence, Jesse felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: fear. Not the fear of bullets or enemies. This was a deeper fear, a fear of the future, a fear of what came next. For years, Jesse had lived by one rule: survive today, worry about tomorrow later. But now, tomorrow was here, and it was coming fast. Jesse didn't belong to Lincoln County anymore. He didn't belong to Murphy Dolan. He didn't belong to the regulators. He was a man between worlds, an outlaw without a side, without a cause, without a home. As dawn broke across the desert, Jesse reached an abandoned lime shack, where he rested his horse and finally allowed his thoughts to catch up with him. The Lincoln County War had taken everything: his friends, his confidence, his purpose. Even his enemies felt different now. Billy the Kid wasn't just a rival anymore. He was a reminder of the choices Jesse had made, choices that could never be undone. But Jesse Evans was not the kind of man to lie down and accept defeat. He was still young. He was still fast. He was still dangerous, and the West was still wide enough for a man like him. For weeks, Jesse traveled through dusty towns and lonely ranches. People recognized him. Some offered him food and a bed, too afraid to refuse. Others stared at him with suspicion, knowing he carried trouble wherever he went. Every whisper he heard carried the same message: Lincoln County is finished. The regulators are scattered. Billy the Kid disappeared into the hills. Murphy Dolan is losing power. Jesse felt no relief. If anything, he felt more alone. He had won battles and lost battles. He had survived fires and ambushes, but the war had changed him. It had taken a part of his soul he couldn't get back. Still, Jesse kept going. He believed that if he could reach Texas, he might start over again, away from the war, away from Billy, away from every memory soaked in blood. But fate had other plans. Outside a small town called San Elizario, Jesse stopped at a saloon for food. The place was quiet, filled with tired cowboys and travelers. Jesse kept his hat low, but it didn't matter. People recognized danger by instinct. A man at the bar leaned to his friend. "Ain't that one of the gunmen from Lincoln?" he whispered. Jesse heard. He always heard. He kept eating, pretending not to notice. But soon, 2 local deputies walked in, their eyes scanning the room. One of them locked onto Jesse. Jesse sighed softly. He was tired of running, but running wasn't in his nature. The deputies approached, hands resting on their revolvers. "You're Jesse Evans?" one said. Jesse didn't look up. Depends who's asking. We are, the deputy replied. And you're coming with us? Jesse stood slowly, pushing back his chair. He wasn't going to surrender now without a fight. But before anyone drew a gun, the saloon owner stepped forward. Not here, he begged. Please, not in my place. The deputies hesitated. So did Jesse. Finally, Jesse raised his hands, not in surrender, but in annoyance. Fine, he muttered. Have it your way. The deputies escorted him outside. Jesse thought they were taking him to jail. He was wrong. Instead of a sheriff's office, Jesse was taken to a dusty camp where armed guards watched over dozens of prisoners' horse thieves, rustlers, fighters, and drifters. It wasn't an official jail. It was something worse. A temporary holding camp, a place where lawmen bent the rules, where justice was whatever the strongest man decided. The deputy shoved Jesse into a fenced area. You'll stay here until we figure out what to do with you. Jesse didn't like that answer. Figure out, he repeated. What does that mean? The deputy smirked. Means you're nobody's problem yet. But you will be. Jesse grabbed the fence and stared back at him, his eyes filled with cold fire. Let me out, or someone here is going to regret it. The deputy walked away, ignoring him. Jesse stepped back, breathing hard. He had escaped regulators. He had survived Murphy Dolan. He had lived through the Lincoln County/war. But now he was caged like an animal, and he knew cages never held men like him for long. That night, Jesse listened as the guards talked near the fire. Governor wants troublemakers dealt with quietly. Says we can't let Lincoln spill into Texas. Evans is dangerous. Might sell him to the Rangers, or turn him loose somewhere far from here. Jesse clenched his fists. Texas Rangers were the last people he wanted to meet. They didn't care about old wars. They didn't care about sides. They cared about law and order, something Jesse had been running from his whole life. He needed to escape. He couldn't wait for a deal. He couldn't trust a single soul here. But there was a bigger problem. Jesse wasn't the only prisoner planning something. Among the prisoners was a man named Manuel Segura, thief, a gambler, and a smooth-talking troublemaker. Manuel recognized Jesse instantly. You're the one they call Evans, Manuel whispered. The gunman from New Mexico? Jesse didn't answer. Manuel smiled. Good. Then you'll understand what I'm about to offer. I can get us out of here, but I need someone who can shoot straight. Jesse looked at him. And why would I help you? Because, Manuel said, leaning closer, if we don't leave soon, the Rangers will take you, and they don't forget men like you. Jesse didn't respond, but inside, he knew Manuel was right. If he stayed, he would die. If he escaped, he would be hunted. Either way, the outlaw life was closing in again. The West was not done with Jesse Evans. Not yet. The night in the holding camp was unnaturally still. No wind, no insects, no voices. The only sound was the soft crackling of the guards' fire. Prisoners lay on the ground, pretending to sleep. But everyone was thinking the same thing. Something was coming. Jesse Evans could feel it in the air. A tension that made his skin tighten. A heaviness that settled deep in his gut. He sat quietly, his back against the fence, eyes open, studying the shadows. He had survived too many ambushes to ignore a feeling like this. Across from him, Manuel Segura whispered from the darkness. Tonight, Manuel said softly. We go tonight. Jesse didn't answer, but he didn't object either. He wasn't planning to die in a temporary holding camp. Not like some forgotten prisoner. Not as a leftover from a war that was already fading into the past. Jesse Evans knew he was meant for more and meant for something worse. He stood, stretched his arms casually, and waited. The camp was poorly built, wooden posts, weak rope, thin wire. The guards were lazy, bored, and distracted. They had trapped men inside a flimsy cage and convinced themselves it would hold. Jesse knew better. Weak cages only worked on weak men. And Jesse Evans was many things, but weak was not one of them. He watched as 2 guards drifted to sleep beside the fire. Another guard wandered off to smoke. The 4th leaned against a wagon, eyelids heavy. Gun on his lap, Manuel crawled close to Jesse. I'll distract the guard on the right, Manuel whispered. You take the one by the wagon. Jesse shook his head. I don't need you to distract anyone. but just be ready to run. Manuel swallowed hard and nodded. Jesse stepped forward. He moved like a shadow, quiet, smooth, controlled. Years of outlaw life had taught him how to move without a sound. He approached the wagon where the guard leaned. The man was half asleep, eyes drifting shut. Jesse didn't hesitate. He reached out, grabbed the man's rifle, and pressed it against the guard's own throat. The guard jolted awake, terrified. "Don't move," Jesse whispered. The guard froze. Before he could shout, Jesse struck him once across the head with the rifle butt. The man collapsed silently. Jesse tossed the rifle to Manuel. "Cut the fence." Manuel nodded and slid to the fence, using the sharp metal edge of the rifle to slice the rope ties. Jesse turned to the sleeping guards. He didn't want to kill them, not unless he had to, but he wasn't about to let them shoot him in the back once he escaped. He kicked dirt onto the fire, dimming the flames. Darkness swallowed the camp. Then he whispered sharply, "Move." The prisoners closest to the fence began slipping through the gap Manuel had cut. Some crawled. Some stumbled. Some whispered prayers under their breath. Jesse followed last, making sure the guards hadn't stirred. The escape was working. Too easily, and Jesse felt that familiar sense again, danger crawling close. Just as Jesse slipped through the fence, a gunshot exploded behind him. A guard had woken up. "Prison break," he shouted. "Evans is loose." Chaos erupted. Prisoners ran. Guards fired rifles into the darkness. Horses neighed wildly. Jesse sprinted toward the fields, bullets tearing through the grass around him. "Go," he yelled at Manuel. "Split up." Manuel ran left. Jesse ran right, diving behind a fallen log as bullets sliced the air. He rolled, fired back once, and struck a lantern hanging from a post. The lantern fell, bursting into flames. Fire spread quickly, lighting up the camp, confusing the guards. Shadows jumped. Horses kicked through the fence. Prisoners scattered in every direction. Jesse used the chaos to his advantage. He ran low, fast, silent, keeping to the darkness while the guards aimed at the prisoners still trapped in the firelight. He reached the tree line. His lungs burned. His muscles ached. But he kept running. He wasn't free yet. Jesse didn't stop until the camp was a distant glow behind him. He leaned against a tree, catching his breath. Moments later, Manuel stumbled out of the darkness, gasping. "You made it." Manuel Wheez. Jesse nodded, checking the area. "We need horses." "There's a ranch south of here," Manuel said. "If we're fast, we'll be fast." Jesse cut in. Manuel smirked. "You know, we make a good team." Jesse didn't respond. He didn't trust Manuel, but he needed him for the moment. The two men began moving across the dark fields, heading toward the ranch, but Jesse felt uneasy. Something was wrong. Manuel kept glancing at him, too often, too nervously, and finally, Jesse stopped walking. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Jesse asked. Manuel's eyes widened. "No reason." Jesse stepped closer. "Don't lie to me." Manuel hesitated, then whispered, "The guards. They weren't going to send you to the Rangers. They were going to sell you." Jesse froze. "Sell me? To a bounty group? A private one? They want you alive. Why?" Manuel swallowed. "Because Billy the Kid isn't your only enemy. Someone from Lincoln wants you brought back." Jesse stared into the darkness, jaw tightening. He didn't need a name. He knew who it was. Murphy-Dolan. They weren't finished with him. They wanted him returned under control, under watch, maybe even underground. Jesse clenched his fists. He had escaped the regulators. He had escaped the law, and now his own employers wanted him hunted like an animal. The betrayal burned deep. Before Jesse could respond, a distant sound reached his ears. Hooves. Slow at first. Then louder. Manuel looked terrified. "They're following us." Jesse pulled Manuel behind a cluster of rocks. He listened closely. The riders were moving fast, too fast for ranch hands, too organized for random travelers. "They're coming," Jesse whispered. "But not for you." Manuel swallowed hard. "What do we do?" Jesse checked the stolen rifle and tightened his belt. "We finish the ride to that ranch. We get horses, and we disappear. And if they catch us..." Jesse's eyes narrowed with cold fire. "They won't." He stepped out of cover, scanning the moonlit fields that the chase had begun. But it wouldn't end the way his enemies expected. The night around Jesse Evans felt alive with danger. The sound of hooves grew louder behind him, steady, fast, confident. Whoever was chasing him was not afraid of the dark. They weren't confused by the open fields. They knew exactly who they were after. Jesse didn't need to look back to understand one truth. These riders were professionals, not deputies, not regulators, not farmers seeking justice. These were bounty men, hired trackers, the kind paid to bring someone back alive, or dead. Jesse tightened his grip on the rifle as he and Manuel pushed deeper into the night, faster. Jesse muttered. Manuel stumbled. "I'm trying." The moonlight stretched long shadows across their path. Every minute felt like the riders were getting closer. Jesse could almost feel their breath on his neck. But fear didn't slow him down. Fear sharpened him. After nearly an hour of running and hiding in the dark, Jesse spotted a shape on the horizon, a ranch house, with a barn and a few scattered corrals. Exactly what they needed. "There," Jesse whispered. Manuel nodded, but hesitated. "What if the owners wake up and shoot us?" Jesse gave him a hard look. "Then don't give them a reason." They approached quietly, keeping to the shadows. The ranch was calm, no dogs barking, no lanterns glowing. Jesse led Manuel to the back of the barn. When he slid the door open, the smell of hay and horses washed over them, a gift from fate. 3 horses stood inside, resting peacefully. "We take 2, Jesse said. "And the third?" Manuel asked. Jesse pointed toward the riders in the distance. "We give them nothing." Manuel nodded, understanding. They saddled the horses quickly. Jesse moved with instinct, every motion, fast and precise. Manuel's hands shook, but he managed. As they prepared to leave, Jesse paused and listened. "Hooves, close now." "Too close, ride." Jesse barked. He jumped onto his horse, Manuel close behind. They burst out of the barn and galloped into the open plains. Dust kicked up beneath their horses' hooves. Behind them, shouts echoed. "They're here." "Evans, stop. Don't let him get away." Jesse pushed his horse harder. The animal responded, powerful and swift. "Keep up." Jesse yelled over the wind. Manuel held on for dear life. The bounty group rode in a tight formation, their silhouettes black against the moonlit horizon. These were not men hired for simple jobs. They moved like seasoned hunters. Shots cracked through the air. Bullets whizzed past Jesse and Manuel. Jesse ducked low, urging his horse forward. "They're gaining," Manuel cried. "No," Jesse said. "We're slowing." Ahead of them, the land dipped into a dry riverbed. Jesse made a decision fast. "This way." He led Manuel down the slope. Their horses slid through sand and rock, stumbling but staying upright. The riverbed walls rose around them, offering some cover. Jesse scanned the area quickly. "We hold here," he said. Manuel's eyes went wide. "Hold? Are you crazy?" Jesse didn't answer. He dismounted and positioned himself behind a large boulder. Manuel hesitated, but fear forced him to follow. The bounty riders appeared at the ridge above them. The leader, a tall man with a long coat and cold eyes, raised his hand. "Evans," he called out, "give yourself up." Jesse didn't reply. "We don't want you dead," the man continued, "but we'll take you that way if we have to." Jesse finally spoke, his voice calm and clear. "You're wasting your breath." The first shot came from the ridge. Jesse returned fire instantly, hitting the rock beside the shooter's leg. Dust sprayed upward. Bullets rained down. Jesse and Manuel pressed against the boulders as stone chips exploded around them. Manuel trembled. "We can't win this." Jesse stayed focused. "We don't have to win. We just have to get out." He scanned the riverbed and spotted a narrow path leading upward, a steep slope to the west. "Manuel," he whispered, "when I tell you to run, you run for that ridge, alone." Manuel gasped. Jesse nodded. "I'll cover you." "Why help me?" Manuel choked. "Because you helped me escape." Before Manuel could reply, Jesse rolled out from behind the boulder and fired 3 quick shots. The bounty riders scattered, taking cover behind rocks above them. "Run," Jesse shouted. Manuel bolted toward the slope. Jesse kept firing, forcing the riders to duck. The leader shot back, missing Jesse by inches. Manuel scrambled up the slope, hands and knees clawing at the loose dirt. Jesse retreated slowly, firing as he moved. Once Manuel reached the top and disappeared behind the ridge. Jesse turned to climb. A bullet struck the rock beside his hand, sending shards flying. Jesse stumbled, but he pushed upward with every ounce of strength he had left. Halfway up, the leader fired again. This time the bullet grazed Jesse's arm. Pain shot through him, but he didn't stop. He reached the ridge, rolled over the edge, and landed beside Manuel, breathless and bleeding. "You're hit," Manuel said. "Just a scratch," Jesse grunted. Below them, the bounty riders regrouped. One of them tried to follow, but the loose slope slowed him down. "Go," Jesse ordered. "Don't stop." They ran again through brush, over rocks, across open fields. Behind them, the riders tried to give chase. But Jesse and Manuel vanished into the darkness. They didn't stop until dawn burned the horizon red. They found a small grove of trees and collapsed behind the cover of thick brush. Manuel looked at Jesse's bleeding arm. "We need a doctor." "No doctor," Jesse said. "Just give me water." Manuel handed him a canteen. "You're going to bleed out." "I won't." Manuel studied him, his voice softer. "Why do they want you so badly? Why would Murphy Dolan send those men?" Jesse didn't reply at first. He stared at the ground, jaw tight. Finally, he muttered, "Because I'm the last loose end." Manuel's eyes widened. "You know too much." Jesse nodded. "More than they can risk." Manuel swallowed hard. "Then what now?" Jesse wiped blood from his arm and looked toward the distant, empty land. "Now," he said quietly, "we disappear." But deep inside, Jesse knew the truth. His past was not done with him. His enemies were not done with him. His story was not done with him. The final chapter was coming, faster than he could outrun. Jesse Evans lay under a thin spread of shade, looking up at the bright Texas sky. His arm still carried the scar from the bounty riders. His body felt older than his years. The chase, the gunfights, the escapes, each one had taken a piece of him. For the first time, he began to feel something he never expected. Not fear, not anger, tiredness. He had run from the law, from enemies, from his own choices, for years. But a man cannot run forever. Not from the world. Not from his past. And especially not from himself. Manuel sat nearby, still breathing hard from the journey. "We're safe for now," he said softly. "They won't find us here." Jesse didn't answer at first. He watched a bird circle high above them. "Safe," Jesse finally said. "There's no such thing for men like us." Days turned into weeks as they hid in the borderlands, moving from small camp to small camp, living off whatever they could hunt or steal. Manuel still talked about Plans Mexico. New towns, new schemes. But Jesse's mind had changed. He was starting to realize a hard truth. The West was changing. The world was changing. Men like Jesse Evans didn't fit in it anymore. One night, as the fire burned low and the sky glittered with stars, Jesse spoke quietly. "This can't go on," he said. Manuel frowned. "What do you mean?" "Running, hiding, always looking over our shoulders." "It's what we do," Manuel replied. "It's who we are." Jesse shook his head. "It's who we were." He didn't say more, but inside, he knew the road he was on would end in only two places, a grave or a cell. Weeks later, fate chose for him. They were crossing open land in Texas when a group of riders approached, this time not bounty hunters, but lawmen, real officers, calm, serious, and prepared. Jesse could have tried to run. He could have reached for his gun. He could have turned it into another bloody chapter. Instead, he looked at their badges, then at his tired horse, then at his own hands. He slowly raised them. The law finally had Jesse Evans. He was taken in for cattle theft, just one crime on a long list the world would never fully record. No one in that courtroom truly understood who he had been in New Mexico, or what role he had played in the Lincoln County War. To them, he was another outlaw, another thief, another problem to lock away. The judge read the sentence. Years in prison. Jesse didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't beg. He simply nodded, as if part of him had expected this ending all along. Prison was a world of stone and steel, of rules and routines. For a man who had lived under open skies and slept beside his horse, the walls felt like a cage around his soul. But Jesse never broke. He lived quietly. He watched. He listened. He fought only when he had to. Some guards respected him. Some feared him. Other prisoners learned quickly not to push too hard. Even behind bars, there was something in Jesse's eyes that warned people to keep their distance. At night, staring at the dark ceiling, memories haunted him. He saw the dust of Lincoln County. He heard the gunfire that echoed through the streets. He felt the heat of the McSween house burning. He saw Billy the Kid standing behind that fallen log by the river. Quick and fearless thought. Sometimes he wondered if Billy was still alive out there. Sometimes he wondered if people told stories about him the way they told stories about Billy. But more often, he wondered what his life might have been if he had chosen differently. Time passed. Seasons changed. Somewhere out in the world, Billy the Kid was shot and killed. The Lincoln County War became a story told in newspapers and saloons. New names took over wanted posters. New outlaws rode new trails. The world moved on. One day, a guard came to his cell and unlocked the door. "Evans," the guard said, "get up, you're done here." Jesse stared at him. "Done. Sentence is over," the guard replied. "You're free to go." Free. The word felt strange. Jesse walked out of the prison gates into the bright daylight. No gang, no war. No gun in his hand. Just a worn-out hat, a tired body, and years of ghosts behind him. The world he stepped into was not the same world he had left. Towns were bigger. Law was stronger. Railroads cut across the land where open trails used to be. The Wild West was starting to fade. There are many stories about what happened next. Some say Jesse Evans went to Mexico and died in a bar fight. Others say he changed his name, settled somewhere quiet, and lived out his days as an ordinary ranch hand. A few claim they saw him years later, an older man with hard eyes, sitting alone in the corner of a dusty saloon, saying nothing, watching everything. The truth is, no one really knows. Jesse Evans simply vanished from the records. No grave with his name. No final arrest. No official report of his last days. He rode into history the same way he had ridden through life, fast, mysterious, and impossible to fully track. But his shadow stayed out in every story about the Lincoln County War, in every tale about Billy the Kid, in every whispered legend about the outlaws of the Old West. Jesse Evans is there, just beyond the edge of the light. He was the man who helped start a war, the rival who stood against Billy the Kid, the outlaw who fought, ran, survived, and then disappeared. Some men are remembered as heroes, some as villains. Jesse Evans was something in between, a man shaped by a hard land and a hard time, who chose a dangerous path and paid the price. As long as people tell stories about the Wild West, about gunsmoke, dusty towns, and outlaws who refuse to bow the name Jesse, Evans will still rise up like a ghost from the past, not as a legend told to children, not as a saint or a monster, but as what he really was, a man no one could fully understand, and no one could ever completely forget.